Right, let's focus on the mad dash for a long weekend holiday, which always happens this long Easter weekend. The Lebombo Border post in Komatipoort between South Africa and Mozambique is one of the country's busiest, even on the best of days. With a long Easter weekend, traffic volumes are expected to increase dramatically. Let's go to the border now. I'm joined by our reporter, Manqoba Mchunu. Manqoba, thank you so much for joining us. You know, in December last year, this is, as I said, a busy port, but it was really quite chaotic in December. Long queues, lots of trucks, lots of businesses. How's it looking at the moment?
Well, Sid, I can tell you that it's a far cry from the scenes that we saw here in December. Of course, you recall, Sally, those long staking queues, the trucks that had been queuing here, making their way to the border. I think that queue stretching more than 10 kilometers back in December. I think we saw similar scenes again at the beginning of the year in January, when those holiday makers who had been heading towards Mozambique were making their way back into the country. And of course, at the time, officials had their hands full as far as processing some of those that are using this border were concerned. Well, it's quite the opposite what we're seeing this time around, Sally. And of course, I guess that speaks to just some of the plans that officials have put in place. We know now that they are having a one-stop in terms of processing of those that are coming through the border, and that one-stop shop is just located several kilometers outside of this particular border. But we're also seeing quite a number of law enforcement officials. The Border Management Authority is here just to see the situation and to ensure that those that are using this particular border are processed fast enough. We're also seeing members of the South African National Defence Force. They are manning the borders to ensure that there are no illegal people that are actually using or getting in or out of the country, as well as South African police services that are also here on the ground as far as crime is concerned. Of course, we recall, Sally, that there were concerns in December around some of the hijackings that are taking place here towards the border. Some of the truck drivers are being hijacked, being robbed by some of the criminals. But of course, that is one of the concerns that has been raised by officials, that again, they are seeing some elements of criminality as far as things are concerned. But as you can see behind me, Sally, it's quite smooth. We are not seeing quite huge traffic numbers this time around. I'm not sure whether it speaks to the fact that people are not traveling a lot this time around. But to get a better sense, I'm joined now by the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Let's start here. How is it looking so far? We haven't seen the chaos that we've seen in December.
Yeah, so what we can say, basically up to this point, we'll say that we have been able to manage all of the travelers who came through into the port since this morning. So we can confirm that indeed we do not have any chaos in terms of the corridor, as it were. And we suppose that probably one of the reasons is that maybe people did not necessarily come in large numbers to the port compared to during December, as it were. But in terms of our plan, we were fairly ready, regardless of the numbers that were actually to come. But however, because it is around 5 now, we still believe that there might be people that are still on the N4 heading to the port. So in terms of our plan, we are very much ready to handle them at whatever volume as they arrive into the port, and make sure that they are able to be processed overnight into Mozambique.
Of course, one of the concerns is around criminality and some elements of criminality that have been reported here around the border. What do we know so far about the crimes that have taken place? We've heard of attempted robberies here. Have there been any arrests as far as those are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, since this morning we had a meeting with the Provincial Commissioner of the Police Services, General Smakaleng Manamela, and of course together with the MEC for Safety, MEC Shongwe. Part of the briefing that we actually had was about the criminality that has been taking place on the corridor. So on that basis, I will say that for the purposes of the festive period now, we have intensified the deployment of the law enforcement officers on the corridor in terms of the police services, in terms of members of the SNDF, together with members of the BMA from the law enforcement side, and that is the border guards. But we also have the law enforcement officers in terms of the Mpumalanga traffic police, on the corridor to make sure that we deal with those criminalities. But when it comes to the other criminalities that has been happening before now, as it were, indeed the police, as it were, are busy in the process of investigating those cases. And of course, I suppose at the province level, the police should be able to give some update in terms of how far they are in terms of those investigations.
Have there been any arrests?
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying that in terms of the arrests, the actual report, in as far as that is concerned, will be done by the police in Komatipoort. That is where the actual detectives are, and that is where the actual investigations are taking place. But what I can just indicate, one of the biggest challenges, by the way, that has made the corridor vulnerable previously had been that the provincial traffic law enforcers, for example, they were working normal office hours. They were actually exiting around 4 in the afternoon. We had the discussions with the provincial leadership, and now they are actually going to be deployed on a 24-hour basis. That on its own is going to assist us to be able to deal with criminality that has been a problem on the corridor throughout the night, because most of those issues were happening in the evening.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Mike Masiapato, just giving us an update, Sally, as far as things are concerned. Of course, authorities saying that they're not expecting those chaotic scenes that we saw in December. They are much better prepared this time around. And of course, as they expect those traffic volumes to peak, they're saying that they'll have their hands full, and they are sure that they will be able to deal with an influx if that does happen over this weekend.
All right, so that's the situation at Komatipoort on the border with Mozambique. And of course, during the programme this evening, we will be checking on other routes. Thank you so much, our reporter Manqoba Mchunu, speaking to us from Komatipoort. Now,